Cool. Good afternoon, everybody. I can kind of see my slides from here, so I'm going. Oh, never mind, they're right in front of me. Cool. Off to a great start. Cool. So, good afternoon. Thank you for being here. My name is Alex. Like you heard, I'm a PhD student at the University of Victoria. My pronouns are he, him, and or they, them. And today I'll be presenting on LGBTQ2S sport involvement and community connectivity, findings from Sex Now 2018. I am probably one of about 1 million people who are presenting on Sex Now, so I will try and go through the methods a bit quicker. So let's go. So if you don't know, Sex Now is the principal community-based research project administered by the CBRC. It originated at Pride festivals around British Columbia in 2002, and 2018 saw 3,524 eligible respondents from across Canada, both online and in-person respondents. And Sex Now is utilized as an essential source on data on the health of gay, bi, queer, trans, and two-spirit folks from across the country. Sex Now in 2018 was administered in person at Pride festivals across the country in collaboration with gay men's sexual health organizations and sexual health organizations and with these partners. So thank you for your work and your volunteer experience and all of your capacity. Like I already mentioned, Sex Now was administered using in-person paper surveys, and in 2018 saw the optional dried blood spot administered as well, and was done through June to September of 2018 at LGBTQ2S Pride festivals. Eligibility criteria: you had to be a Canadian resident, you had to be 15 years or older, or 18 for the dried blood spot test, and you had to either identify as a non or heterosexual man or have had sex with a man in the past 5 years. So sports. So Toronto and Vancouver actually have over 20 LGBTQ2S specific recreational sports leagues or organizations themselves. And while these are the largest in the country, there are leagues across the country in cities across the country. Actually, last night I was having a conversation with somebody who was talking about a gay bonspiel in Saskatoon, and I think that's fantastic. That's amazing. Some of these organizations have also been operating since the late 70s. I think this is really interesting. So some of these organizations are actually some of the oldest gay organizing in the country. Vancouver has a long history with these organizations. Vancouver was the second host city of the Gay Games in 1990. San Francisco had it twice. You were the third Gay Games, but the second host city, so congratulations. So despite this long history and active participation of LGBTQ2S folks in these recreational sports, we don't actually see very much research on the role that these organizations play in LGBTQ folks' health and well-being. And we have no understanding of what potential these sites might mean for interventions for public health, for frontline work, for sexual health more broadly. So, some of our demographic results. The sample size was 3,251 responded to the question specifically asking about involvement in LGBTQ sports organizations, and over 1 in 10, so about 12%, reported being involved in LGBTQ sport leagues or recreational activities. This represents actually a larger proportion than I was expecting. Maybe not surprising, those who identified participation were substantially more, or were more likely to identify as white. And the median age was 34 versus 32, so slightly older than those who said that they hadn't participated. That bar graph is, for all of my figures, the blue bar represents those who identified participation in sport, and the pink bar identifies those who have identified no participation in these sports organizations. So before I start with this slide, somebody pointed out that I screwed up. So I'm going to point this out now and own that because I'm really bad with technology and think of it as witchcraft. So as I was translating the highest education level, that does not make sense. Ignore that. Cool. So some other demographic results that came to light. folks who participated were more likely to have a bachelor's degree than those who didn't, 67 versus 51%, i.e. why that bar does not make sense. And this is actually something that was surprising to me. I was expecting to see more folks identify as gay. However, more folks who participated were more likely to identify as queer. You can see that in the top figure. While the first one makes it look like more folks identify as gay, that's across SexNow data more broadly. However, when we look at those who are participating, they are more likely to identify as queer, which is the third set of bars. So some more results. So men involved in these sports leagues were also more likely to report being out about their sexual identity, 92 versus 85%. They were more likely to identify being satisfied with their connection to LGBTQ communities, 74% versus 52%, and I think that's a particularly interesting finding. And they were also more likely to identify being satisfied with physical spaces to meet guys, 48% versus 40%. So that might be more likely to feel satisfied with going to gay bars or physical spaces. So some more results. People who identified as participating in these organizations were also more likely to identify having at least 10 people to count on for support, so they potentially have more robust networks of support among their friends and communities, which I think is really interesting. And participants involved in LGBTQS sports organizations also reported high levels of involvement in gay activism, 59%, and personal voluntary action. It's, I think, worth noting that I don't know which way this relationship goes, if they're more involved and thus more likely to participate in sports, or they participate in sports and thus are more likely to get involved in their communities. I suspect that it goes both ways. So what? I am always like, I'm using a Drag Race GIF. So we see a significant relationship between participation in these sports organizations and community connectedness. I think this might actually be a really interesting space to think about future involvement for frontline work, for sexual health work, and participation. As we saw, 12% of respondents, that means that there's a lot of folks who are engaging in these spaces and that there's a lot of folks who are potentially interested in getting involved. So community organizations may want to think about looking to these sports spaces as partners in challenging feelings of isolation. We talk about feelings of mental health or negative mental health among gay, bi, queer men. So thinking about both as a space for referral, but also as a space to have these conversations. LGBTQ sports organizations themselves may want to explore issues of diversity within. As we saw, folks were predominantly more likely to be white. And we can think about these organizations and the ways that we can build upon them to become more inclusive and diverse, so that if there is benefits to involvement, that we're ensuring that all folks within queer spaces have access to them. And we also, I think, need more research. We don't really understand the role that these organizations are playing in LGBTQ folks' health, and specifically gay, bi, queer, and trans and two-spirit folks' health. And I think that's something that we're potentially missing out on. So these are some of the references and some of those images. I actually want to go back for a second because I think this is really cool to these two images on the right. The first is the poster from the 1990s gay game here in Vancouver. And on the top right is a bunch of folks who are actually watching a gay softball league in Toronto, the Cabbagetown Gay Softball League, that has now rebranded itself as the Cabbagetown Softball League. And this is a photo from the early 80s. So again, these have been sites of community and outreach and folks and places where folks have gone to meet each other. So again, those are my references where those images come from. So the City of Vancouver Archive and the archive formerly known as the Canadian Lesbian Gay Archive, now the Archive. I don't know how to say that with a Q, so I might have just butchered that. I'm so sorry. And I want to say a huge thank you to all of those who have participated in the past, present, and future versions of SexNow, our community partners, and the Advance Avancé Alliance, all the staff and volunteers who make SexNow possible, CBRC Research Working Group, SexNow Core Team and Grant Teams, collaborators and funders, and also my co-authors on this presentation, Aidan Ablona and Nathan Lachowski. And this is my info if you have questions or if you want to chat more about this. I'm always happy. Cool. Thank you.